Hi guys, this is Adam and welcome to my new video. Time flies by really quickly, and in less than 4 months from now, Apple will hold their Worldwide Developer Conference, also known as WWDC. And at the first keynote of this conference, Apple always introduces their new operating systems, and this year should be no exception. So in the beginning of June, we will get our hands on iOS 14, as well as iPadOS 14, macOS 10.16, watchOS 7, and more. But let's focus on Apple's mobile OSs, and it's iOS and iPadOS, which is essentially the same system, just named differently. Every user of iPhone and iPad is probably curious if their device will be supported by the newest operating system, and there's numerous reports suggesting which devices will be supported and which won't. Of course, I don't know for sure which devices are gonna be supported, so the next few minutes will be just my guess, but it's very likely that Apple will follow the same pattern from previous years. So I think my guess will be pretty close to reality. So which devices are gonna be supported by iOS 14 and iPadOS 14? Let's find out. Every year, Apple usually cuts support for the oldest iPhones in their lineup, like last year when they stopped supporting iPhone 5S and 6. But every now and then, they give the oldest iPhone extra year of support. It happened with iPhone 3GS, which received its third major upgrade to iOS 6 in times when iPhones usually receive just 2 major upgrades. It also happened with iPhone 4S, which got iOS 9 even though it was supposed to be cut off support. And recently it happened to iPhone 5S, which was supposed to end its support cycle with iOS 11, but it received iOS 12 anyway. And this year, almost everyone is saying that the iPhone 6s and SE, which are essentially the same devices in terms of used hardware, will be cut off and won't receive iOS 14. But I don't think that's the case. You can notice that every time Apple extended support for one of their iPhones, it was always the S model, 3GS, 4S and 5S. And I think this year will be the year when the legendary iPhone 6s will receive its extra year of support. Apple usually stops supporting iPhones when the phone's hardware just can't keep up with the features of the latest iOS. That's why iPhone 5S and 6 were cut off last year, because they were limited by the aging processor and just 1GB of RAM. But iPhone 6s is different. It was such a huge step in terms of performance over the iPhone 6 that it has no problem running the latest version of iOS 13, and it's really fast, even though it's getting close to being 5 years old. That's why I think that Apple will continue to support this phone for at least one more iOS version. Of course, I could be wrong, but there's one more reason why I think that the 6s will be supported, and that's the 2017's 9.7-inch iPad. The thing is that when Apple stops supporting one of their devices, then they stop supporting every other device running the same hardware. For example, first generation iPad Air and iPhone 5s share the same A7 CPU and 1GB of RAM, and they were cut off support at the same time with the release of iOS 13. So if the iPhone 6s were to be cut off, then Apple would stop supporting the 2017 iPad as well, because it has the same A9 CPU and 2GB of RAM, and that would mean that this iPad would receive just 3 years of support, much less than the usual 5 years, which is the standard for Apple devices. So at the end of the day, I think that these iPhones will receive iOS 14. iPhone SE, iPhone 6s and 6s Plus, iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, iPhone 10, iPhone XS and XS Max, iPhone XR, iPhone 11, and iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max. On the iPad side, I'm really curious to see which iPads will make the cut for the iPadOS 14, because Apple has been really focusing on the iPad software lately, and they've been adding software features like crazy. So I'm looking forward to see which hardware will be capable of keeping up with the features of iPadOS 14. But I'm almost sure that the iPad Air 2 will be the one to be cut off. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not a bad tablet, and it's still more than capable, but it was released in 2014, and that makes it, alongside the iPhone 5s, the longest supported iOS or iPadOS device in history. So I believe Apple will say goodbye to this champ this year, and the second iPad that will most likely be cut off is the iPad mini 4. This one does have even less powerful CPU than the Air 2, so I think it's no question that this iPad will not receive iPadOS 14. But in my opinion, these will be the only iPads which Apple will stop supporting, because the second oldest model, 3rd generation iPad Pro, does have a powerful A9X CPU and 4GB of RAM, so I think Apple will definitely release iPadOS 14 for this device. So following iPads will most likely be supported by iPadOS 14. 1st generation iPad Pro, 9.7-inch iPad Pro, 9.7-inch 2017 iPad, 2nd generation iPad Pros, 9.7-inch 2018 iPad, 3rd generation iPad Pros, iPad Air 2019, iPad Mini 2019, and 10.2-inch 2019 iPad. So thank you guys for watching, and write me in the comment section if you think that the list of supported devices for iOS and iPadOS 14 should be different. And of course, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. See you next time!